Alright, so Facebook versus Australia. Let's talk about that. I don't really like bringing politics onto my channel, but this is just so stupid and it's been annoying me all week. So let's get it off my chest and then I can move on with my life. But keep in mind, I am still a little bit sick, so I'm gonna do my best to not meander too much off topic. Also, because I'm sick, I might need to take a break halfway through. I feel like this is gonna be a really long video, so please bear with me. But I have made a quick list of points to try and keep me reasonably on topic, and if I forget where I'm going, hopefully this will bring me back to the subject. But yeah, so bear with me, and since I've got it in sections, I guess I'll try and put bookmarks in the description, but because I may meander, I wouldn't necessarily say they're the most accurate, but let's try and get through this. Facebook versus Australia, which that's what the media and the government are saying, but it's really Facebook versus the media, the government, and the political / bureaucratic class who are just completely out of touch. But let's begin with part one, the background. Ooh, sections in one of my videos. So one of the things that's been going on is journalism has a struggling business model. They've struggled to adapt, and so they've seen their advertising revenue go down. That's one of the main ways the media makes money. They've tried to get subscriptions going, I guess, to mimic the days when people used to actually go out and buy a newspaper, but that's had varying success because the internet is just such a different platform to what the media is used to. But I think advertising's had a big impact. So what the government and the media are saying is that they look at Facebook and Google, they see that Facebook and Google are sucking up so much ad revenue, they're these huge global corporations that are they've got such a huge market share, blah 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 blah. And that's fine. I agree with that. They're quite dominant companies. They've managed to, yes, pull in a lot of advertising revenue, which logically means there's less to go around for everyone else. Okay, I'm fine with that. But where the government and the media get insane is that they're saying that Facebook and Google are stealing the news, which I'm just how do you say they're stealing the news? And they're oh, well, because when there's a link on Facebook or Google, it has the heading and maybe a picture and maybe the tiniest little snippet of what the story is about. And that's considered stealing the news. And I'm just are you kidding? That's not stealing the news. It's a link, and people want to know what they're clicking on before they click on it. They're not if you've ever rickrolled someone and you've disguised the link so that people don't know what they're going to, you know what I'm talking about. If that little preview wasn't there, you'd fool a lot more people, rickroll a lot more people. But anyway, no, it's just that's what the government and the media are saying, is that Facebook and Google are stealing the news because the links appear on their platform sometimes with a little bit of a preview, which is bullshit. So what's really happening, okay, with with this linking issue? So on Google looks for links. It's trying to find you, the person using Google, the things that you want, and you might search for a particular article, or they have a little news tab so that you can specifically look for things that are just news rather than someone's crappy blog post or a video blog on YouTube. And yeah, so they have these little previews, but it doesn't tell you really what's in the article. If you want to read the article, you have to actually click on the link, and then you get taken to the news article, and then you read it, and the ads that go along with the article, that ad revenue doesn't go to Google. It goes to the news website owner. I can't even. And with Google, right, you can actually opt out. If you don't want your stuff to appear on Google, you can choose to opt out. You can tell Google, I don't want you to search my stuff. I don't want you to show my stuff in your results. And there you go. So if you're worried about Google stealing your news, just tell them not to link to your stuff. But no one does that, do they? Because they realize that by having their stuff appear on Google, they get a lot of free traffic. That's what it is. And it's a similar thing on Facebook, except on Facebook it's worse because these news companies come along, they set up their own little page. They post their own news onto Facebook, and now they're saying, Facebook, pay me for being here? Are you insane? Oh man, and the reason that they're on Facebook is because they know that they can reach their audience that way. They get free promotion. It's the same kind of thing, free advertising, basically. They should be paying Facebook. Like, we should all be paying Facebook to use their platform, but thankfully, like, you know, one of the successes of Facebook is that they let us on there for free. Obviously, that means that we're the product in the end, but hey, that's another discussion. Let's try and stay on topic. But yeah, so all these media companies, they're on Facebook of their own free will. They are posting their own stuff to Facebook. Facebook isn't stealing it. They're giving it to Facebook, like, and they're not even giving the whole article. They're giving them the link saying, hey, Facebook, send traffic to our website. That's what's really happening with, like, the whole Facebook kind of thing. Facebook doesn't copy the entire article and post it on there. Google, at least, is actually searching for the news. But Facebook didn't ask for any of this junk to be put on their platform. Like, I can't even. If you can't understand that, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to... it's just a complete misunderstanding of how the platforms work. It's like me as a musician, if I go onto Facebook and I post my link to my Bandcamp, which I'll put somewhere up here, go listen to some of my music. I'll put my solo project up. That's the weirdest one. You probably don't want to listen to it. But anyway, wow, tangents. So, like, if I go onto Facebook, I want to promote my music, so I post my Bandcamp link. It would be like, you know, do I have a right then to tell Facebook to pay me because I posted something on their platform hoping they give me traffic? There's just no logic. And it's like, one of the examples I've seen is if someone puts a political campaign poster or, you know, one of those little lawn signs on your property and then asks you to pay them to promote them, kind of thing. Or like if you hired a billboard, but instead of paying the billboard owner, you ask the billboard owner to pay you. It's just like this complete backwards nonsense. So that's what's really going on with, like, Facebook and Google. They're not stealing the news, they're just hosting links to the news, and it's actually good for the news to be on those platforms. Otherwise, why would they bother? Why wouldn't they opt out? They don't. They post their own stuff. Like, I know on Facebook, sometimes, like, a random like me might post an article, but the news websites themselves are there. What are they complaining about? Anyway, so the other thing is, because you can promote yourself on Facebook, actually, smaller independent news companies stand a bit more of a chance against these big giants in media that are already established. Like, if you want to start your small little paper independently, you can just do it on Facebook, you know, have a link to your website, whatever. You don't need these big upfront costs to try and promote your stuff around wherever. If you're doing a niche publication, it's easier to find your little niche groups and all that. So it's actually good for smaller independent journalism as well. I mean, yes, there's fake news, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, for people trying to get going, it's a way to do it. So that's me talking about the background. Wow, it took me 8 minutes. I didn't think it would take that long. I'm definitely going to need some breaks. Anyway, so the legislation that the Australian government came up with, and they got the ACCC involved in this. The ACCC, the Australian Competition Consumer something, I'm too tired to remember exactly what they are, but they basically deal with competition law in Australia. And they're the ones who basically drafted this at the direction of the government, but still, like, usually I would respect the ACCC because they do, you know, make sure products are safe. Like, they'll issue recalls if they need to be. I think there's other bodies involved in that, but the ACCC puts out a lot of recalls. They also try and manage competition. But one of the things that they've done is they let Channel 9 and Fairfax merge, two big companies merging into an even bigger company, and then they whine about media diversity, which is like, that's another thing I forgot in the background section, but like, one of the things is they reckon if they can get more money from Facebook and Google to the media, that somehow there'll be more media diversity. And I'm like, how? What mechanisms are you putting in place for media diversity? Pretty sure Facebook and Google kind of allow for more of that because the little ones can get seen, but whatevs. No, I meant to talk about the legislation in this section. So the ACCC got involved, they helped draft this. It's like an old dude who probably doesn't even know much about Facebook. I mean, I'm making assumptions, but generally the older generation don't quite understand how some of this tech works. It's just a reality, right? So what they've come up with is this code, the News Media Bargaining Code, And so the obvious thing is they want Facebook and Google to pay large media businesses. I understand, like I haven't looked at it in detail because I get bored of that stuff. I'm so over politics anyway. But as I understand it, news businesses that earn over a certain amount were going to be included in this code. And if your news business earned over a certain amount, then Facebook and Google would have to do a deal with you for your stuff to be on their platforms. So like that's a pretty wide range, but it also doesn't address the smaller media companies, or the ones just getting started. Like they're completely left out. So I mean, like that's kind of the obvious part. I mean, if you want to do it that way, whatevs, but yeah, bit weird. But the next part, like the things that are problematic, I mean, we can talk about I've gotten my brain into a smush. So getting Facebook and Google to pay large media companies is already a bit weird. But the next thing is the algorithm, right? So one of the things in this code is that these big media companies need to be given advance notice of changes to the algorithm. And like, why? Why do they get preference over every other creator on the platform? Like, media has been elevated above, your charities, elevated above your musicians, your artists, your other content creators aren't getting this treatment, and they are still struggling to get their stuff out in the same way that the media is struggling to get stuff out. Why does the media get special treatment on this? They get advance notice of the algorithm. And then Google and Facebook are going to have to be adjusting their things so that they can tell, it's not done in a fair way. It's not done in a logical way. Another part of the legislation is binding arbitration. So first of all, Facebook and Google have to talk to the media companies and try and come to an agreement. But if the media companies say, no, we want more, then it goes to an external body and they get final say, and they're biased towards the media. And like, if you're running a business, it's not really viable. Like, you don't know how much the media is going to ask for, and this body is going to be on their side. Like, it could easily financially get out of control. And so I can see from a business perspective why Facebook and Google are like, wait a minute, this is a bit much, right? If you're trying to plan your business and you have this potential expense and you don't know how big this expense is going to be, and if it sucks, it's final, you can't really appeal it. Like, of course you're going to be like, what is this code? Like, we can't do business this way. That's why Google threatened to pull search out of Australia, and Facebook we're saying they're going to shut down the news. And of course, eventually they did. It's because it's not financially viable if you have that much uncertainty in how much you're going to have to pay people who you shouldn't have to pay in the first place. So, from a business perspective, this legislation is just insane, at least how it was written before they changed it. And then at one point, I don't know if this got pulled out of the code later, but at one point it was sort of an all in or all out kind of deal. So Facebook and Google would have to make deals with every single media company, otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to have any news at all. And that's crazy as well, and that's another thing that's influenced what Facebook's action was. So the legislation, if I'm looking at my notes, in summary, it was like, pay the large media businesses, give them advance notice of algorithm changes, or no one else gets that treatment, the binding arbitration thing, and then that all in or all out provision, which I think might have been removed later, but I haven't kept up with every single thing. Yeah. And this is all from a liberal government obsessed with the free market. Now, for those of you who are Americans or overseas, when I say liberal government, I'm talking about our right-leaning government. They just use the name liberal with a capital L, not a small l. I know it's confusing if you're used to liberals with a small l being the lefties, but no, these are the right-wing, and at times, and now they're not as bad, but they were really right-wing a few years back, and oh my god, bloody Tony. Anyway, they're the more like free market capitalism, whatever. And here they are writing legislation to prop up the failing business models of a few large media companies. It's just a little bit odd. So, moving on, why Facebook pulled the news. Well, so for one thing, as I mentioned, the all in or all out provision, that used to be a thing. Don't know when it got pulled out or if it's still a thing. That Facebook was trying to comply with the legislation, right? It hadn't been passed at that point. Maybe it had only passed the lower house, I don't remember. I've been sick all week, don't blame me. But so, for one thing, they were going with the all in or all out kind of idea. They didn't have deals with all the media companies, so they had to pull all of the media off Facebook. And then when you're talking about media and what counts as news, the legislation, like I tried reading what their definition of news was in the legislation, and it just didn't make sense to me. It's so broad. It's like anything that could be of remote interest to the Australian people. Or there's something like that, like close enough to that, that I'm like, that could be anything. Anything really. And so I'm not surprised when Facebook tried to enforce a ban on news content that a whole bunch of other stuff got caught in the, like, as collateral damage, because the government intentionally made the definition of news too wide. And like, you know, I've heard that this is a Murdoch media thing. I'm not going to get into that discussion, but like, whatever the motivation, the definition of news was too broad. It's just insane. Like, anything could be news, really, if you tried hard enough. So Facebook was just trying to comply, and it's unfortunate that some websites like the Bureau of Meteorology got taken down, but if you consider, they're giving you news on the weather, so do you see what I mean? Like, anything could be news. So that's what they were trying to do, is they were actually trying to comply with the legislation. But on the media and from the government, you hear this narrative that they're doing something illegal and there's going to be class action lawsuits and blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, are you insane? You literally asked for this. If you thought that you were being exploited by Facebook having your content there and not paying you for it, well, if they're not putting your content on there anymore, didn't you just get what you wanted? You want your stuff on Facebook to be paid for. Facebook's like, we can't pay you. Okay, so your stuff's not going to be here. Instead of applauding, everyone's like, ooh, or the media just, it's so illogical. You asked for this. You either want your stuff to be paid for or you don't want it on Facebook. That's what you were saying. But now it's taken off Facebook and you go and have a cry. Just makes no sense. But so I'm getting off topic. Next point. Why they pulled the news. Oh yeah, to show that the media needs them more than they need the media. And I had a huge laugh when, you know, a day or two after the media ban kicked in, the media was reporting how their internet traffic had dropped. No shit. Doesn't that just prove that Facebook was doing you a service and that you should be paying them, not the other way around? Like, oh my God. And what was interesting though is, like, you know, the media keeps reporting how people are so outraged, and I think I even saw Sky News Australia claiming that Facebook's business model was stuffed. Like, are you crazy? You think so highly of yourself that Facebook needs the media? That's just not the case. They didn't start as a media company. They're a social network. They don't need you. I can't even. But yeah, so one of the interesting things is the media is saying that people are upset, people are boycotting Facebook, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at the numbers, apparently, like, the traffic from Facebook went down and didn't rise anywhere else. You know, some of the reporting worded things a bit weirdly. So they said the share of Google searches went up, but obviously if one goes down, then the share of the other would go up. The actual traffic didn't really increase from Google or whatever. A handful of people did go and download the ABC app, and, you know, they got a bit of traffic from people trying to find it in alternate ways. But a lot of the people on Facebook who used to get their news there just didn't switch. So, you know, Facebook is actually giving a good lot of free traffic to the media, and the media's just been completely ungrateful about it. So, you know, Facebook are trying to prove a point, saying, like, actually, you need us. We can survive without you. And there are quite a few people, I mean, the media doesn't want to admit this, but there are quite a few people on Facebook who are saying, actually, I like a news-free Facebook, you know. I can see more of stuff from my friends, there's less clickbait articles showing up, there's less of this crappy news showing up in sponsored posts. Now, to those people, obviously you can just unfollow the news and hide all, but not everyone's really great with how to use Facebook on that end, I guess. But the fact that the media just ignores that side of things, I can't even. So yeah, Facebook pulled the news partly to comply with the legislation as written, and partly to prove a point. They're saying, like, we give you a service for free, and you want us to pay you. That, it just, you know, they're trying to show that it doesn't make sense. Anyway, so before I go on, I think I need to take a quick break and maybe get a snack and have a bit more of a drink, because we've got a little bit more of a rant to go on, so bear with me, guys. I'll be back. Alright, I'm back, and this next section is titled, Why I've Got the Shits, although in the description, if I'm putting a bookmark, I may have to censor that to something else, because I don't want YouTube to get mad at me. But anyway, why I've got the shits, and let's start off with the entire political/bureaucratic class and media being dishonest about this whole thing. And it's weird because they're all saying the same crap. So, you know, it's the Liberal government who've come up with this legislation, you know, used the ACCC to give it legitimacy, and they've come up with this terrible legislation, which seems to a lot of people to be designed to prop up the Murdoch media business. Now, I don't know how much of this is actually what's going on, but that's what a lot of people think. And in that case, you'd expect some of the media and some of the political class to be against this. But no, it's not just the Liberal Party supporting this. It's Labour. That's the other major political party in Australia. They're the more left-leaning one. So the Liberal Party is right of centre, the Labour Party is left of centre. And then you've also got the Greens on side. The Greens! The Greens are the far left environmental party who are constantly criticising the Liberal Party. And they're in on this as well. And they're like, oh my god, Hanson Young, she's I think a Green senator, and she was saying that the government should set up their own search engine if Google pulls out. And I'm just like, are you insane? Like, the government couldn't even get people to download the COVID Safe app. I mean, a decent proportion of us did, but there's so much paranoia over an app that doesn't even track where you are. It just tracks who you've been near for a few minutes. That's it. It just takes down their phone number. It doesn't even know who they are. You can put a fake name in there. As long as you put your right phone number in there, it's doing the job. It doesn't know where you've been. It just knows what phone numbers you've been close to for a little bit of time. If the government can't even get people to sign up to that app, do you really think that people are going to want to use a search engine where they type in all the porn that they're looking up and then the government can see it? And, you know, I use porn as an example because it's hilarious, but there's all kinds of things that people might be searching that they don't necessarily want the government to be looking at. People going on about privacy, and yet they still use Google and Facebook, what even? But hey, it's my favorite thing about the COVID Safe app is people on Facebook complaining about their privacy. There's a lot of stupid that goes around. But anyway, no, the Greens are in on this. That's super weird, because especially if there's this paranoia that it's a Murdoch bill, you know, to prop up the Murdoch media empire, you'd think the Greens would be like, no, we're against this legislation. But no, they were on board. It's just this weird bipartisan mess. I want to use ruder words, but I'm just like, no, those words don't come out of my mouth generally. But yeah, no, it's just the weirdest thing that the entire political class seem to get onto this, and I include the bureaucratic class because I don't really know what to call the ACCC, but yeah, there's just a lot of garbage. I think there was like some business body who were saying this is insane, don't do it, but all the major players seem to be on board, and I just don't understand. And I guess all I can put it down to is, you know, the political class, as much as they have disagreements, they do still want to be in power, and I think they see Facebook and Google and the internet in general as a threat because they can't control it, they can't control the narrative, perhaps. I don't know. It's just weird that the Greens would get involved in this. I don't get it. Like, if it was just about media diversity, I can see the Greens getting in on that because that's one of those sort of bleeding heart kind of goals, but That's not how the bill was written. It's got a lot of these insane provisions, and like they're not even challenging the government for a change. It's weird. It's like when the Liberal government at the start of the pandemic increased welfare and brought in the JobKeeper and just like put heaps of money. Like it's that kind of weird that a party is doing the opposite of what it normally would, except with the pandemic that was justified because they locked down, people lost their jobs, blah blah. But the Greens just going along like sheep on this, it's really weird. And then from the media, like, so I get it when some obviously biased media go along with a narrative, but this was this weird bipartisan thing in the media as well. So you've got the far right Sky News Australia, who are just whinging the entire time, going along with the government narrative. They hate Facebook, blah, 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 blah. And then on the other side, the other extreme, you've got the Guardian newspaper, which is very left-wing, and they're going along with it as well. It's just, I mean, the media has a conflict of interest because they want the money, so of course they're going to go along with it, but it's weird that there was this bipartisan thing as well. I guess it's better explained in the media because they're the ones who are going to benefit from this, but like, you know, so it's weirder in the political class because you'd expect them to fight. But even the media, like the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, they're the government funded one, and they're supposed to try and present more of a balanced view, but in this they didn't either. Like, and they don't rely on advertising revenue, so they are going to get money out of this because they did end up being included in the legislation. But not even them providing a balanced viewpoint, and they're the ones who are supposed to be the most balanced. Now, when it comes to the ABC, I know if there's political people in the comments who, depending on which side of politics you're on, you'll probably think that the ABC is biased. But what I find hilarious is that you know, the right wing will always say, oh, the ABC has a left-wing bias, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, if you go far left enough, they'll be like, oh no, the ABC has this horrible right-wing bias. And I figure if both sides think that the ABC is biased in the opposite direction, then generally the ABC is doing a good job. Because if you're pissing off everyone, then your bias, you're doing both sides fine. I do personally tend to think that the ABC has a slight left-leaning, but I think that's partly because we have a right-wing party in power, and so the ABC's job, like a good journalist should be questioning government, and so that's, I think, partly why they seem to lean left at the moment. And I mean, I wasn't really focusing on that stuff when Labour was in, and Labour hardly ever get in because they always make these huge promises and then screw them up somehow. But, you know, it'll be interesting if we do get another Labour government. I'll be interested to see whether the ABC does lean more right. But as long as they're reasonably pissing off everyone, I tend to think that they are providing some kind of balanced view, and each side is just getting upset at the pieces of it that they don't particularly like. So normally I'm on the ABC side, but they really didn't present the opposite side of the argument on this at all. They were still pushing the narrative that Facebook is evil, Facebook's the bad guy, our news is being stolen kind of thing. They occasionally played a clip of someone, like some American dude overseas who was saying like, this legislation is crazy, but they didn't really hear those people out. They didn't discuss it in any detail. They were just going on about how Facebook, oh, they've gotten so big, oh, look at what a monopoly they are, we've got to do something about it kind of thing. They were going along with it, and that gives me the shits, because I'm not someone who is usually suspicious of, you know, I mean, of government and the media, particularly in the centre kinds of, like, centre parties and centre media. I don't usually have that whole conspiracy-minded thinking. Now, obviously, with far-right media, far-left media, and some of the ones that have a mild bias that's quite obvious, I'll be a little bit suspicious of them, but for the more in-between stuff, I generally haven't been. But on this case, both the government, or the entire political class, and the entire media have all been in on this really, like, deceptive kind of message they're pushing. And it's just, like, that gives me the shits. It's just, like, is no one going to stand up and be like, hey, actually this is bullshit? I saw maybe one article on The Conversation that was bringing it up, but that's more of an opinion kind of are they a publication? I don't know what you call the conversation, but they're more about opinions rather than like, you know, news. And so the big news media companies didn't really address the proper argument and what's actually going on and how Facebook and Google actually work. No one really explored that. None of the major players explored that. It just blows me away, and it's really done a lot to damage my confidence in things like media and the government. And I'm going to end up sounding like one of those conspiracy theorists, or like, you know, who is it, Sargon and those guys who are all about free speech, right? As far as those things go, like, I get it. In the UK, for example, apparently the BBC, which is also, like, it's their ABC equivalent, the BBC apparently has this huge left-leaning thing going on, and people are genuinely unhappy with it. And when I've looked at some of the BBC stuff, I'm like, okay, I can see, like, there is a lot of bullshit going on there. Whereas the ABC here in Australia, I think Australia is a bit more politically balanced. Like, we don't really give a shit the way that Americans do. Americans get really passionate about this stuff. They're very polarized. Whereas in Australia, we're like laid back. She'll be right, mate. They had to make voting compulsory here because otherwise we'd just stay home, have a barbecue. But no, they made voting compulsory, and a lot of voting places have barbecues to lure us out so that we'll actually go and vote. We're very chill about this stuff. Like, she'll be right. You get a few extreme lobbyists and a few protesters, but for the vast majority of Australia is just like, whatever, mate. So, you know, I think that's been my attitude a lot, but it's sort of reflected in the media and the fact that our government, you know, our major political parties are fairly center. They're not like, you know, they do have a right-leaning or a left-leaning, but it's not too far. It's not like, you know, the vast difference between Republicans and Democrats and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're not that crazy here in Australia. We're very much to the center. I think because we all have to vote, the parties have to stay in the center because, you know, if they piss off everyone, it's not going to work. Whereas in somewhere like America, you know, the people who don't really care don't have to vote. So you're mainly playing to those extremes who will get highly motivated to go vote. Here in Australia, we're like, nah, she'll be right. But if you give us a far right policy or a far left policy, the bulk of Australia is going to be like, that's crazy, and so it won't fly. And I think that's my tangent, because I'm not supposed to go on tangents, but that's my tangent opinion on one reason why Australia might not be as crazy as other countries. Plus the she'll be right, mate. You know, that's like, you know, everything's fine. Whatever. You know, laid back. Blah, 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 blah. I completely went off topic there, didn't I? No, what I was going to talk about is with the ABC specifically, like the fact that they didn't explore different sides of the story in any meaningful way. It's either poor quality journalism and, like, you know, they have investigative journalists who would be able to research and find out that they've got it wrong. The mainstream narrative they're pushing is wrong. But if they can't figure that out, it's either that their quality of journalism isn't as good as it's hyped up to be, or they're being intentionally manipulative because they want a slice of that money. Now, I get it, the ABC has been cut for ages, and so, you know, they would like more funding. But to go along with this, it's just really disappointing to see the ABC get swept up in this. You know, the government-funded, supposedly impartial broadcaster is just towing the government line, and Anyway, I already mentioned the government media scared of losing power / control, so we can move on to the next bit. Ignoring the real issue with the media's business model. So other reasons I've got the shits. So one, like, the media business model at the start of the video, I think I mentioned like that they used to sell physical newspapers, and advertising is a big part of that as well. Like, even though they sell you the newspaper, there's a whole lot of ads in that print media. You've got ads on TV, blah, 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 blah. Then the internet comes along, and there's so many more ways to advertise that companies don't necessarily default to the media. They find other ways to put their ads and get their name out. They might even go on Facebook to give themselves a name and advertise for free in that way. So on one level, the media's lost that sort of advertising thing. But another thing, and this is a point that I think Google made, I'll put a link to, like, Google's article, their response, one of their responses to the legislation. They've got like 8 points on why they think the legislation is bullshit. And I think this is one of the points from that. But so apart from advertising, you know, going out onto the internet and suddenly there's all these ways to advertise, and Google and Facebook are quite big, so they've got a lot of that advertising pie. Another thing that's happened is that there are now specialist websites for real estate, car sales, employment ads, and then you've got sites like Gumtree. I don't know if eBay is the same anymore, like, you know, if you want to sell your random stuff, but Gumtree is like that sort of more democratic marketplace. And if you think about, like, back in the day, for those of us who are old enough to remember a time when the internet wasn't like this, it wasn't huge, it was more like a military kind of thing that the general public didn't really deal with. In newspapers, you used to have a lot of those real estate ads. You know, here's my second-hand car sale that I want to sell. Here's my old chair that I'm trying to get rid of. And, you know, there were lots of those little ads as well in those. And now you don't need to go to the media. You don't need to pay a newspaper to host your ad on that. You can go on Gumtree for free. You can even post your stuff that you want to sell on Facebook for free. Yeah. So and like employment ads as well. Yeah, there's entire websites dedicated to employment. So instead of searching through a newspaper for a job, you just go online, you type in your search term, and it's much more efficient to find something that matches your qualifications, your interest area, the salary that you're looking for. Like, there's all these specialist websites, which means that the media businesses who used to get advertising money from that more targeted, specialized kind of thing, they're not getting that money anymore. They might get a little bit here and there. I know our local paper has real estate in it. But for a lot of these things, it's gone online. Like, even for real estate, you can go to like Domain or something like that. There's a few websites and you can type in what you're looking for in a house, and, you know, how many bathrooms and bedrooms and car spaces do you want. You know, it's much more efficient on the internet, and so that's where a lot of that advertising money has gone. It's not necessarily that Google and Facebook have taken it all up. There are these specialized websites that have also sucked it out of the advertising revenue for media companies, and the media doesn't talk about this. And they don't, like, I mean, I think media companies realize their business model isn't really that stable in the internet era, but they don't even talk about some of these issues. Like, if you're trying to give balanced coverage on what this whole Facebook versus Australia thing is, wouldn't you say, like, you know, what are the reasons that media is struggling? Here are some points. Here are points from both sides, instead of just this one-sided media/government nonsense. Oh my god. Okay, so I had a thought and I'm trying to think, is this one of the things that's coming up? But now it's gone, so let's just move on. What the government should have done. Okay, so like, I accept that Facebook and Google are these huge international companies, and, you know, they probably don't pay their fair share, really. Like, they suck in a lot of money, and then you've got all these little loopholes, so that, you know, you can say that a profit is overseas, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, they're big, dominant companies. Monopolies are not great. Google, I think, has less of a monopoly in a way, because equivalent search engines also exist. Like, they're generally not as good at finding the results as Google, but they do exist. People use stuff like DuckDuckGo or whatever. Facebook is a bit different in that, like, a lot of social media companies have tried, but they haven't really worked. There's things like Instagram, which is linked to Facebook. There's TikTok, Snapchat, all the things the kids are using these days. I'm not a kid, I don't get those platforms. But, you know, they're very visual, very like visual, audio-visual kind of stuff. Facebook is a different thing because you can actually write a lot more detail and so on. And so Facebook perhaps has a bit more monopoly on that type of social media. But anyway, never mind that. I agree that something should happen to, you know, rein in some of these big businesses. But instead of coming up with this ridiculous media code that makes false claims and comes up with a terrible way to sort out the issues, one of the things the government should have done is just fix the tax loopholes. What a concept! Fix tax loopholes. Or if it's not possible to do that, introduce a new tax that, I guess, levies big international tech companies in some way that doesn't pretend it's because they're stealing from the media. Like something that's at least honest. Taxes, it's honest. Look, you guys are big companies, you're coming to our country, you're making all this profit, you should pay your fair share. Fair enough, why not? I mean, okay, it's the Liberal government, they don't like imposing taxes, but it would make more sense, especially like, it's in a pandemic. I can't believe that, like, the last I've heard, they're still gonna go ahead with the next tax cut for wealthy people. I'm just like, they're just gonna put it in their bank account. Are you insane? But anyway, that's another rant. No, if they wanted to deal with Facebook and Google in a sensible way, they could have just increased taxes. And the next thing is, okay, so if we're talking about the media diversity problem and all journalists, they're struggling, they're not getting enough money to support what they do. Journalism is so important, blah, 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 blah. Okay, in that case, how about you just fund the ABC and the SBS properly? And maybe introduce some more mandates to increase rural news coverage. Is that what I wrote? Yeah, that's what I wrote. Hey, because, like, I think it was it Tony Abbott who was like, oh, if you vote us into government, there'll be no cuts to the ABC and SBS, and then of course he got into government and then cut it. Like, and I don't think any government has restored that funding since. So, and they keep doing efficiency dividends and trying to make the ABC do more with less. And so of course, media's being squeezed, and the government could easily like, okay, so maybe you go and tax Facebook and Google, and then you can use that money to properly fund the ABC and SBS. What a concept. And, if you're worried about bias in that, I mean, you could, it's difficult, but if you really wanted to, you could say, okay, let's have like a subset of the ABC that's dedicated to right-leaning stuff, a subset that's dedicated to left-leaning stuff. I don't know if that would really work, but just in general, if you want to support journalism, you could just do it through the national broadcaster. The SBS, I think, is, I don't remember what it stands for. Something broadcasting service. Probably special. I don't know. They deal with a lot of foreign language content because we have a huge multicultural population. So they do like Greek news and, Korean news. I've seen Japanese news and tried to follow along, but my Japanese isn't good enough. Anyway, they also have American news on SBS. That's fun sometimes. But yeah, so you could just fund those guys, but also mandate more rural coverage, because a lot of those rural media companies, those tiny ones, they're really struggling, and so they could actually use the government funding, because if you think about remaining commercially viable in those tiny little towns is so difficult. That's one of the places where you might need some government intervention to prop those up, because who else is going to go in there if it's not profitable? And then I can hear Dad moving along around, so let's just pause for a minute. Hey. All right, sorry for that interruption. Dad's working from home this week, so I wasn't even going to record today because I've been sick, but hey, I saw this crap on my news feed on Facebook with the news coming back, and it just set this off. Anyway, continuing why I've got the shits and what the government should have done. The last point I had on that was accept the Facebook and Google news plans. So, I mean, Facebook and Google, I think they've been a little bit nervous about government action for a while, because overseas, some governments have tried to do stuff that's a little bit similar. So they've actually, and then I think also with them being big companies and a few scandals, like Facebook has definitely had a few scandals. Google, I think, a bit less, but I don't pay attention to a lot of that stuff. But I think with some of those scandals and them being huge corporations, they want to sort of, as a marketing kind of thing, they want to rejig their image so that they seem more like the good guys. And like, all the fake news that's on the internet, they want to address that so that they don't get punished, don't get lumped in as one of the bad guys. So Facebook and Google already started up proper news products. I'm not talking about the news tab on Google that specifically helps you find news. And I'm not talking about the thing where you swipe on Google or, Google can recommend you articles. I'm pretty sure that's not the same thing. Facebook has Facebook News and Google has Google News Showcase. And as I understand it, these are to pay for original journalism instead of just, swiping stuff off someone's website and just chucking it on there. No, this is actually paying journalists for original news. I'm not sure how it works on Facebook, but in the Google News Showcase, one of the things I understand that they're doing is, you know how you go to a website, a news website, and it's got an article, but it's behind a paywall, and it's like, you have to subscribe, you have to pay this much money per month to get access to this article. This is a members-only article, right? Google wants to take those articles from behind the paywall, put them into Google News Showcase, pay the media company that they took it from, and give it to the people for free, and then pay, like, you know, they get the money back from putting their own ads on it. I think that's how it works. And like, that's sensible, because who likes these little subscription things? Like, I don't want to subscribe to a media company that I'm only going to read one article on, you know? Like, if I really think they deserve support, maybe I would sign up. But if it's just to read one article, are you crazy? And they put up so much clickbait because they want you to sign up to these things. So I think, like, Google's idea is like, look, we take these things out of the paywall. The public hasn't seen this news. We'll put it up on our thing. And you get paid because people wouldn't pay you otherwise. You know, some people subscribe, but most of us won't. So you get actually paid more than if you kept it behind the paywall. And we'll put it here. We get a little bit of money. You get money. Everyone's happy. You know, people get access. It's like a win-win-win for everyone. And I think that's pretty sensible. Facebook, I think, is doing something similar. I mean, they say original journalism, I think. So I don't know if they're going to like commission journalists to write specific like topics and whatever. We'll have to see. I haven't paid as much attention to what their product is. But the fact is, these Facebook and Google, they have been investing in the news. They have been working on products to help journalism. They're just doing it in a way that makes more sense than paying to link to something that is, you know. Yes, one of the crazy things is, like, some of those paywalled articles, the media company themselves will post the link to the paywalled article. So people see it on Facebook, they click it, and then they're like, oh, I have to pay for it. You know, like, it's a disappointing way to do it. Clickbait is annoying anyway. I get annoyed when I see clickbait, like, on YouTube as well. You know, especially, like, when it's obviously intentional clickbait. That just gives me the shits. If it's just someone who, like, overhyped it a bit, okay, I'll let that pass. But if you're doing this shit on purpose just to make your stuff sound more exciting than it is, anyway, yeah, no, I just think, like, the government should have listened to Facebook and Google during negotiations and all that kind of stuff. Listen to the fact that they already had these plans and then just accepted it. But, like, what's super weird is Google will, instead of, like, Google's like, you know, screw it, we'll just make deals with Channel 7, Channel 9, we'll just get all these media companies on board and maybe the government will leave us alone. So they went ahead with their Google News Showcase anyway. And then with Facebook, they took all the news down. They've been in more negotiations with the government. They were going to take Facebook News away from Australia, not even bother with us for the moment, which would have been a lose situation for the media. But they kept talking to the government gave them reassurances, changed bits of the legislation, which I haven't really fully looked at to see exactly what's changed, but it does sound minor. It's just like, it sounds pointless, like Facebook, like the government made this legislation only to, like, get into a situation where they can't ever really use it, but whatevs. Facebook negotiated with the government, and now they're gonna do Facebook News anyway, which is what they were saying the government should let them do in the first place. And then the government runs around trumpeting like this is a triumph, like this wouldn't have happened if we hadn't done this, kind of thing. It's just like there were better ways to handle this. You could have just negotiated this from the start instead of coming up with this disingenuous legislation that shows how out of touch you are with technology. Like, bad enough that you screwed up the NBN, the National Broadband Network, which is our internet. Australian internet is notoriously behind, you know, like, we're at the level of, you know, some of the least developed countries have better internet than us in some cases. Maybe not so much now, but definitely a few years ago we were really struggling with our internet, and it's because the government just doesn't understand technology. Anyway, so to summarize why I've got the shits, especially because this has been chopped up, but why I've got the shits, in summary, so the entire political / bureaucratic class and the media is being dishonest about what's going on and just the reality of it all. Even the Greens have got into it. It's just, like, insane and frustrating as hell. They've also completely ignored the real issue with the media business model, and ignored that whole fact of specialist sites filling the gap where their advertising used to list products. My brain's just having a little brain fart. Please bear with me. I'm still a bit sick and I've been talking too long. Anyway, and then why I've got the shits also because like the government could have taken all these other steps, all these other sensible options, and they didn't. And they just wanted to like, you know, swing their power around, which is actually kind of futile. Like they've got no real power in this area, not really. They just wanted to be like, you know, beat their chests and act like they did something. They could have closed tax loopholes, made new taxes for those big companies. They could have just given more funding to the ABC and SBS, mandated more rural coverage, and they could have accepted Facebook and Google's news plans from the start instead of going in this ridiculous circle just to get to the same point that the companies were saying, hey, we should do this instead. Like, you know, to save face that they couldn't come up with a good idea. They're acting like they're responsible for Facebook News and Google News Showcase when these were the things that the companies were advocating in the first place. It just makes no sense. And like, so what the government has essentially achieved is this big mass wank between all the political class, the bureaucratic class, the media class. Like they've all just had this group wank over it, achieved basically nothing. And what's really happened is that big companies, Facebook and Google, have given a little bit of coin to small hang on, let me get my brain straight on this. So we've got our big companies, Facebook and Google, and we've got our big media businesses, Rupert Murdoch, Channel 7, whoever else, all the big channels and big media whatevers. One big company, or two big companies, have given a little bit of coin to some other big companies, and then the government's standing there pretending they did it for the little guys. It's absolutely not what happened. It's just, yeah, you know, I don't want to sound like Trump because he's an idiot and he's one of these elites in a sense, but you know, it's just elites giving each other back rubs and you know, like what happened to drain the swamp? No one ever drains the swamp. They only ever talk about draining the swamp, and then it's all just this big swamp party and the rest of us are standing around going like, what are you people doing? It just makes no sense at all. So let me gather my thoughts just a bit. Yeah, no, it's just, it didn't help the smaller journalists. It didn't help the independents. It didn't help media diversity. I mean, like, it's good that those smaller media companies are now back on Facebook and they stand a chance to promote some of their stuff. And then there's like journalist groups, I think like student groups that got taken down as well. So they've gotten their groups back presumably, and they can keep, you know, working on their studies and talking to each other and building their portfolios and so on. But, you know, Facebook, just by existing, is doing more for those smaller independent journalism, whereas the government has achieved nothing of the sort. Anyway, where this leaves me, the final section, where this leaves me, or the final-ish section with me, it's never over, is it? So, I've already been tired of politics for a while. I've mentioned this, you know, in live streams, I think. You know, I didn't really pay much attention to politics until 2016 when I was very badly depressed, and I was just like, I just started watching a lot of YouTube, started watching those American comedians. Then of course Trump turned up, and you know, watching that shit show in 2016, also Brexit, also we had an election here that year, I think. So 2016 was a weird one to just get sucked into, you know, learning more about politics and so on, but you know, I'm not depressed anymore. I've got other things I want to do with my life. It's always the same old shit. If I don't have to vote, then there's nothing I can change by knowing all this stuff. Not really. I mean, you know, you could argue, oh, but you're on YouTube, you could change opinions. Yeah, but I'm a tiny YouTuber and I'm not focused enough to ever become like this big political channel that influences your opinions. And also, like, people on YouTube mostly only watch what they already agree with anyway. So who are you influencing? No one. You're just confirming what someone already thinks. So for me, with politics, it really only matters when I'm trying to decide who to vote for. And I don't know when the next election is. I can show you how I choose who to vote for if you guys really want that. But until that happens, I don't really need to know about this nonsense. Like, I mean, I guess so that I have a negative opinion of everyone, but I always have a negative opinion of everyone anyway. I'm kind of grumpy like that, right? So I was already tired of politics. And I've been trying to like watch less of it. There were a few political channels that I watched for a while, but I've just sort of disengaged. Every now and then maybe I'll watch something, but usually if I think there's going to be a laugh. So like every now and then, Sargon used to do this, but then he changed the name of the channel, and I'm just like, this sounds like some kind of sex show, so I'm not going to subscribe to that. You can fuck off. I'll hide all of that. I don't want to see that. Obviously it's not that, but it just sounded really like, and so out of protest, I'm like, I just hide you completely until you change to a better name. I don't know why he keeps changing names. Anyway, so the most recent one I would have watched would have been Ben Shapiro stumbling on some ridiculous thing someone did. That's the kind of stuff I watch. The stuff that's funny in a way. Like Ben Shapiro, he annoys me most of the time, but every now and then he finds some crazy far left kind of nonsense and just beats the crap out of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is amusing. You kind of need someone that's like on one extreme to find the most ridiculous stuff on the other extreme. So yeah, I don't really watch a lot of that, but occasionally. That's like the extent of my political engagement online, I guess. And then I watch the news just to keep up with what's going on, but I'm sort of like, well, I was talking about politics just then, but no, so hang on, let me get my thoughts straight. So I'm tired of politics. I'll only really engage with it on purpose if I think it's going to be funny and amusing and ridiculous in some way. So like this sort of cynical engagement with the news instead of a proper one trying to be informed. Politics instead of a proper, oh wow, see, I'm getting mixed up with news and politics now, but yeah, I'm not really engaged with politics. I don't go on protest. I went to one protest once and it was just stupid because it got hijacked by this Socialist Alliance chick who was not talking about what the protest was actually about, and I'm just like, shut up with your shrieking. Anyway, and then petitions, most people don't set up a petition the proper way to get the parliament to actually read and respond to it. And then even when they do read and respond to it, how much gets done? I don't know. And then I tend to be undecided. I tend to be in the center. I tend to spend too much time listening to both sides of the story and then struggle to come up with an opinion that takes everything into account. Because like, it's just very hard as a human to do that. Yeah. My brain's just like, go on another tangent, but let's not do that. So yeah, I'm already disengaged from politics until I have to actually choose who to vote. And then I will look at what each candidate is saying, what party they're in, what their policies are, and I'll rank them, and that's how I vote. But now, instead of just being tired of politics, I'm sorry it's taking so long to get to the point, I'm now also tired of the media. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, now that they've shown just how biased and dishonest they can be, like in an objective way, not even in a conspiracy theory, free speech, censorship kind of way, in just this, you know, like this is a real thing that they could have easily checked on, you know, they could have easily checked the facts and easily presented an alternative opinion, and they didn't. Like, it's an obvious thing. It's not things that we can debate about regarding free speech and censorship and, you know, never mind conspiracy theorists, we know they're crazy, but like, you know, free speech and censorship, I know a lot of people feel very strongly about, but on the upside, like, you can debate those things. So I'm not gonna like get annoyed at the media just based on like, you know, whether people think that they're doing censorship kind of stuff. I'm going to get annoyed if it's just this very ordinary run-of-the-mill kind of political fuck-up. I feel like I haven't really worded this right. I don't know if you get what I mean, but it's just that it would have been so easy for them to figure this out and present a different viewpoint, and they didn't. Like, not even the ABC, who were meant to do that kind of stuff. And so, for me, it's really damaged my view of the media. yeah, because I'm not usually someone who feels that way. I'm usually going to give you the benefit of the doubt, realize that you're human, realize that you made mistakes. But this one just felt so intentional. And, no one in the media addressed their own conflict of interest, that they stand to make money from the legislation passing. It's just the most dishonest, like blatantly dishonest thing the media has done. It's not even the normal biases we see in media. It's not like Sky News versus The Guardian. It's all of them. They've all been this dishonest about something that, yeah. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I'm just like, I'm tired of the media. So I'm basically putting my own media ban on Facebook. I've already unfollowed one of the ABC pages that I was following, and if I see Channel 7 news pop up, because they're often trash, I'll just hide all. Like, usually I don't hide all because I've got a friend who sometimes comments on their stuff and it's amusing to read their comments, but I'm just gonna hide all of it, have no news on my Facebook. While the pandemic was on, I got into a bit of habit of watching ABC News 24, the 24-hour news channel. I would tune into that while I'm having breakfast or eating lunch or whatever. I'm not going to do that anymore. I mean, half the time it's just these boring press conferences. We're not in the middle of the exciting part of the pandemic when, oh my God, the entire country is locked down. We've never done this before. Like, that's all done with. I don't have a reason to be consuming as much of the media as I have been. So I'm just going to disconnect from it, like not just from politics, but from the media. I'll continue watching the evening news because, I need to get a reasonable update on what's going on in the world. But I'm only going to watch like the ABC at 7 p.m, just their standard news stuff. Occasionally biased stuff does pop into there, but they're much more likely to just give you the facts than some of these other channels. And the program after at 7:30, oh my God, that gets so much bias. That's probably one of the most biased programs on the ABC. But yeah, no, it's just disappointing because, we go on about how the media is so important to democracy, blah, 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 blah. And then they go and do this. And I'm just like, you're not helping the people by being this dishonest. And so it's just like, broken the rest of my trust in that whole system. And it's a weird feeling because now I'm on the same side as a lot of those conspiracy theorists because I've just been so disappointed by the whole thing. So yeah, tired of politics, tired of the media. And some of this stuff is why I don't talk about politics on my channel. Because it's just, there's so much dumb shit in it, but also because I don't really enjoy like political arguments already. But now I just don't want to look at the media either. Does it matter if I know what's going on in the world, me personally? Not really, because I'm just a random with blue hair, well, blue and red hair, sitting around at home, not really doing a whole lot with my life because I'm a mess. No, and I should be spending my time on more productive things like making music, engaging more with my creative life instead of what the media is throwing at me. And so for me, I guess it's been a bit of like a wake-up call to just stop caring about this stuff. Is like I guess part of my image maybe, or the whole existential thing, like, or a nihilistic thing, like I don't care about the world, getting depressed and all that. Sometimes maybe I seem disconnected from the world, but I think also some of the depression I've experienced is because when I was younger, I was told that Disney vision, that the world is great and, the Catholic upbringing and God's got everything covered kind of thing, this ideal world that you teach kids about because you want kids to have a nice childhood. But what you don't tell them is that when you become an adult, it's all a lie and you've got to try and handle what the world actually is like. And so I grew up with that kind of thing and then find out the world's shit and I'm just not prepared for it. Like, thanks. Where was I going with that ramble? Oh my God. But no, okay, so I think one of the reasons that I got depressed is because I wanted the world to be what I was promised it would be, and it's not, and I was disappointed, and I think that's one of the sources of depression. And I think I just need to get away from the media and politics because it's all that same kind of crap. It's like the world is shit, And do I really want to know about it? Probably not. Maybe to inspire some song lyrics, but since I don't have anything ready for lyrics at the moment, then I don't really need to know about any of these issues. I'll research them when it's relevant to me. But yeah, no, so I should spend more time on music, more time making YouTube videos about, you know, weird and wonderful things that just I forgot the word that I was looking for, that just make me interested. Is it pique my interest? I don't know. But yeah, I just explore all the things in the world, try and get more into my creative life, and just not give a shit about the real world, because the real world doesn't work for me. I mean, look at me! Do I look like someone who fits into the real world? And you know, now I've got kid ears. Not really! I don't fit into the real world very well, so I should just focus on my creative life and see if I can find ways for my creative life to engage with the rest of the world, entertain you guys. Yeah, so I'm done with politics and I'm done with the media, except for like those few things where I just need a basic understanding of what's going on in the world, and when it comes time to vote, I need to know who I'm voting for. That's about it. I don't want to know otherwise, because what can I do? Not a lot. Okay, so that is... This is an hour-long video, and I'm about to make it even longer because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to my computer and pull up 2 Facebook rants on the subject, just in case I missed anything. So yeah, I'll read out those rants, and yeah, if you listen to those, listen to anything I might have left out. I think they might also be a bit more concise in some aspects, although they do leave out some details. So we'll go do that. And hopefully fill in any gaps. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer, but depends how much energy I have, because if I'm disconnecting from politics and the media as completely as I can possibly justify, then maybe I don't necessarily want to engage with your comments on the subject. So if I don't reply, I'm sorry. But this is just what I need to do for my mental health, and also, you know, that disappointment I have in the world. Also, as I mentioned, I'll put a link to that Google thing, the 8 things wrong with the media code, into the description, so you can look at that, Google's response. And then I'll put 2 of Facebook's responses in the description, because I'm not really sure which one to put. So yeah, if you want to see Facebook and Google's side, because the media has pushed their narrative, and I think even internationally it's the same thing. They're all worried about losing their power, I guess. Is it all about power? I don't know. You can argue about that if you want. But yeah, I think the media basically everywhere has pushed the same thing, and some governments overseas have also gone along with this. So you can read that anywhere. But if you're looking for Facebook and Google's responses, I'll put them in the description for you. Okay, let's go to the computer and I'll read out some rants for you and then hopefully wrap up. I lied. I'm making noodles first, and I'm decidedly not watching the TV while I have my lunch. Alright, we're back, and so... Sorry, Marley, I freaked him out. I'm just sitting here quietly, and then all of a sudden I start talking to myself, and he's like, what? Anyway, that's my brother's dog sleeping on my bed. No, we're back, and I couldn't completely avoid the news because Dad decided to have lunch as well, and he decided to put the news on. But what was kind of amusing is I was sort of, you know, having a mini rant to him about the thing, and he doesn't get it. I mean, he's the older generation, so, but yeah, and he's I think one of the things that puts me off talking about politics is because, like, anytime I do, he just doesn't get what I'm talking about. He's more focused on his own ideas. He's also a fairly rusted on Liberal voter, so, you know, what mind am I going to change there? But anyway, no, I was having a mini ramble, and we're disagreeing, and we're both, you know, making lunch and sorting stuff out. And then we sit down, and only then does he notice that I've got little cat ears on. Well done, Dad. Anyway, so no, let's get back to these Facebook posts I said I'd read out, because hopefully they'll fill in any gaps that I've missed, be a bit more concise, and yeah, anyway, okay, so this first little rant that I went on, a friend on Facebook who didn't really know what was going on and, you know, had bought the government and media line that Facebook's stealing the news kind of thing, he was like asking, what's this all about? Where can I find information? And since no one else was jumping in, they're just saying Murdoch and shit like that, you know, which isn't really helpful. I thought I'd jump in and actually explain. So, this is what I said. I don't blame you for the confusion, to be honest. The media is obviously biased on this one because they want the money. But what's really weird is that the entire political class seems to be on board, including the Greens. None of them seem to understand tech and how things like Facebook and Google even work, frowny face. News websites post their own stuff on Facebook of their own free will because they want the free promotion, but with this law, they're demanding Facebook also pay them to be here. It's like us as artists and musicians posting our work here to find and connect with fans, but then saying, hey Facebook, not only do you have to help me promote my stuff, now you have to pay me for helping me too. It's very backwards. As for Google, all they do is link to the news and at most show the headline and maybe cover photo of the article. The article itself can only be read if you click it and go to the website. If news sites don't want this, it's also possible to opt out of showing up in Google. No one opts out though because they want the free traffic that Google provides. Facebook and Google are not stealing news. They just link to it or provide a platform where news companies can share their own stuff. That's it. If anything, Facebook and Google are helping the media by making it easier for the general public to find it. The government, though, has fully screwed this up. Beyond just asking Facebook and Google to pay the media, they've also decided an outside body biased towards the media will make final decisions about agreements that have the potential to make Australia financially unviable for big tech. And they also want the media to have an advantage over all other content creators, including artists and musicians, by giving them and only them advanced warning of any changes to algorithms to help boost their posts above everyone else. The media is asking for special treatment above creative people, above small local business, above charities, etc. And it'll be big media who benefits, since they can play the algorithm game more easily than small independent journalists. Also, I'm not sure if this is still part of the code, but the government wanted a rule where if any media company says no to an agreement, then all the other agreements are off, which is why Facebook had to ban all media, including smaller independent journalism, because they have no agreements with anyone, so they can't show any news at all. To do that, they obviously used an algorithm to try to pick up all the smaller news pages and accidentally picked up some other pages by mistake. They weren't trying to ban the Weather Bureau, it just got caught up in the broad net they had to cast out, and they fixed a lot of those mistakes already. The government and the media just want to spin it the worst looking way possible because they're biased and they don't understand tech. They're the ones who gave a vague definition of news. Facebook is just trying to comply. I'm all for finding a way to get big tech to contribute their fair share to Australia, but this was not the way to do it. The government should have, 1, proposed a big tech tax to fund a media program and or actually fund the ABC and SBS properly, and or 2, taken up Facebook and Google on their offers to pay journalists through their own much more sensible programs, Facebook News and Google News Showcase. Facebook and Google offered a decent middle ground and the government didn't even consider it. Google has managed to sign a few big companies up, which might save them, but Facebook hasn't, and so they've withdrawn from the Aussie media landscape, calling the government's bluff. That's my attempt at a crash course in what's going on. For more, since you already seem to have gotten the government media biased version of events, it might be worth looking at Facebook and Google's responses to understand their side of things, which in my opinion is a more accurate look at what's actually happening than what the media is greedily spouting out. Now, this was just after the media ban came in place on Facebook, and so, a lot of stuff was going crazy that day. And I also had to link to Google using Bitly because they got hit as being news as well, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so I think that does fill in some gaps and maybe give you a bit more concise idea of what's going on. Reading out this kind of stuff, this is why I don't script things, because it's so hard to, I just can't sound natural when I'm reading those things. That's just not how I am. Yeah, I prefer to just go at it. I feel like a robot. And anytime I do stick to a script, because I'm trying to look at the camera, then I have to read a bit, try and remember it, do a few takes. I can't. I'm not that kind of person. Maybe if I had a teleprompter, it'd be easier. But yeah, no. Anyway, so the other comment, which was today, and what sparked this whole thing is, I heard that the media was back on Facebook, so I thought, I'll check what ABC's up to, and one of the first things that I came across was a post. This is on ABC News. They also have ABC Sydney and all those different subsets. Excuse me, I just had food, so I'm a bit burpy at the moment. Try not to get on that Reddit page full of burping fetish. Oh my god, Raw Riffs tipped me off to that. Apparently he got in that. Just like, oh my god, YouTube, why are you so weird? Anyway, so I come across this post where the text says, the government got its bargaining code, news businesses will get their check, and Facebook gets a few key concessions, so who won and who lost? And then the article, the headline says, Australians are angrier than they realise, has Facebook misread the room? And I was just like, I did go and read the article, and it's more of the same kind of garbage. You know, it sort of lays out some things, but it's still not talking about, you know, the key issues of the thing. But also, like, Australians are angrier than they realise. Thanks for trying to manipulate our opinions. But so, yeah, when I saw that, like, I had just posted this stupid memory that came up on my, you know, Facebook memories, where, like, you know, 10 years ago I had written about writing lyrics and nibbling on ham circles. And so I'd written, you know, just on my private page, thanks for that update past me. Ham circles are pretty good though. Okay, that's enough morning for one morning. Might be time for a nap already, because this happened at about 8 o'clock in the morning, because, like, I've been in bed most of the week, so I think my body is finally like, no, we've done enough snoozing. It's time to wake up a little bit, even though I'm not 100% and I get tired easily. But yeah, no, my body's done sleeping, I think. So been up since I don't know what time, way too early. But yeah, then after posting that, I looked at the ABC thing and I was just like, this is dumb. So what I've written as a comment to myself, because I copied my comment from the ABC comment I left on under their article, but I also posted this under my personal update. Whoops, 40 minutes later, because typing takes a long time, another reason I don't do scripts, because I edit the crap out of stuff. Anyway, whoops, 40 minutes later I didn't nap because I thought, Aussie News is back on Facebook, I wonder what's happening with ABC News. And then I saw them post this garbage, saying Aussies are angrier than we realise and has Facebook misread the room. Eye roll. Like, fuck you, don't tell me who I'm angry at. You're the one misreading shit. I'm angry at you. And then this rant comment happened, and this is the same on both the ABC post and my personal wall. So, and then my friend, Cam the comrade, whatever, you could keep changing your channel name, I can't keep up. He's like, you know, asking for a rant. What did you exactly say? This could quite possibly be the best media-related rant ever. Probably puffing me up a little bit too much, but let's get to it now that I've hyped it up beyond what it probably deserves. So, I hate that even the ABC was dishonest about this whole debacle and continues to push the narrative that Facebook is the devil, instead of recognizing that media, government, and the general political bureaucratic class were completely wrong-headed about how these tech companies and their platforms work. At best, you're more ignorant than an organization of journalists with the capacity to investigate ought to be. At worst, you're being intentionally manipulative for the sake of greed. I'm not someone who's usually suspicious of the media outside a few companies with obvious bias, but this episode has really turned me off all of it by exposing just how much even the ABC will attempt to force an agenda. On top of that, the fact that you all got on board with the same message and keep expecting us to eat it up is disturbing, and I'm glad we live in a digital age where I can easily bypass the media narrative, check the facts, and see that it's nonsense. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for making a giant like Facebook contribute its fair share, but it should have been done by closing tax loopholes, etc., not this disingenuous boomer legislation and misleading hysteria about Facebook stealing news that you keep posting here of your own free will. If the government really cared about supporting journalism in this country, they could easily restore proper funding to the ABC and SBS and mandate more rural coverage. But no, of course they didn't consider that. I'm actually happy that Facebook took the action they did. It's the media that's misreading the room here. I'm angry at the government for being stupid about this, but that's pretty standard, particularly when tech is involved. Example, the NBN. I'm angrier at the media for playing along, and angriest at the ABC for making only the most tokenistic attempts at any balance on the issue. To some extent, I'm a little disappointed the news band has ended, but not to worry. It's shown me that I need to disconnect from all the media here, make use of unfollow and hide all, and go do something more productive with my time. I still got my key COVID updates from New South Wales Health, etc., and for the rest, I'll maybe just watch the evening news and be done with it. I'll be glad to go back to being disengaged, better than being force-fed blatant garbage. Okay, yeah, maybe that was a bit more passionate than I usually get. You know, I tend to keep some of my political opinions to myself, especially these days because I'm just tired of arguments. Oh my god. You know, I used to have the energy for arguing with, you know, religious people, vegans, whatever. Now I just don't care. And also, I finally found vegans who aren't crazy, so I don't need to argue with those guys. You know, the kinds of ones who recognize that it doesn't suit all of us, like... Look how tiny I already am! Can you imagine if I only ate veggies? I'd wither away to nothing. It's just not my body type. Anyway, so, yeah. And I'm sorry to use the word boomer. Normally I wouldn't, you know. This is one of those words the kids use for anyone who doesn't agree with their perspective and seems a little bit old. And I'm just like... They use it against each other sometimes if you know... Because you can't always tell how the age of people on these things. I'm not even their generation, you know. I'm 32. I'm sort of halfway between the kids and the boomers at this point, I guess. But yeah, it just seemed like the most appropriate word for this because they are making boomer moves. They've shown that they don't understand tech, and they've come up with this terrible legislation, and the media has just gone with it, and it's like... Anyway, so I think that's everything. And now you can see another reason I don't do politics on this channel is because anytime I do, it goes on for more than an hour and I don't even know what we're up to. Like, you remember the last time I did anything really political, like I was looking at why state Labour lost the New South Wales election maybe 2 years ago, and that one went on and on and on, because anytime there's politics, there's so many things, so many different things to look at, and I just don't... Like, I feel like I have to address everything as much as possible and, like, you know, preempt other things that people are going to say and, you know, try and weave through all the complexities, especially for people who don't have background on the issue. And I know I've got an international audience. Some of you won't know that the Liberal Party is actually our right-wing party. Apparently some Americans who move here and want to vote for liberal ideas with a small L accidentally vote for the Liberal Party with a big L. And I'm just like, this is why you research before you vote, guys. Anyway, so... that's my ramble. I hope it made some kind of sense. And yeah, let's try and avoid politics on this channel. I was actually going to go on a rant about education instead. I suppose everything is political if you try hard enough, but I was just going to rant about my disappointment with university. And maybe also high school I could get to at some point. But hey, no, we went on this rant instead. Thanks, Cam, for, you know, inspiring me to actually turn it into a ridiculously long video instead of just a comment on Facebook. But yeah, I'm gonna go watch some other videos up here, support me and subscribe if you really enjoyed this long-winded whatever. I'm gonna go, guys.